Congressman Trey Gowdy of the Intelligence and Judiciary Committees joins us now. Good to see you this evening, Congressman Gowdy. Thank you for being here.
Yes, ma'am.
Want to get your thoughts on this breaking news first, and then we'll get to some of that. What's your reaction to this story in the Times?
Well, I've been in a classified skiff with Director Pompeo for the last 2 hours, Martha, so I'm catching up a little bit. I read the story. Obviously, I want to see the memo. Obviously, I want to talk to Director Comey to determine how contemporaneous his recording of the conversation was, but also importantly, not just what was said, but what did Director Comey hear? How did he take it? And that can only be done, with all due respect to the New York Times, that can only be done by looking at the memo and talking to Director Comey.
Yeah, the New York Times in this report does not have the memo in their hands. It was read to them over the phone. So that in and of itself, you know, as you point out, it's very difficult to get the context if you can't read the whole thing.
Well, if you go back to criminal procedure, which is my background, there's a doctrine called the rule of completeness. Whenever part of a document is introduced, you got to be able to look at the entire document. Your viewers and my fellow citizens deserve to see the entire context of whatever conversation may or may not have taken place. And quite frankly, Director Comey deserves an opportunity to come tell us how he heard it, what he heard, how pervasive it was, and how much of the conversation that segment consumed. So we have a story. There's a reason newspaper articles are not admissible in any courtroom in the United States. I'm not knocking the reporter. The reporter does good work. But we're a long ways from a conviction, the fact that we simply have a headline in the New York Times.
So in terms of the, calls for a special prosecutor, an independent prosecutor, this is going to only fuel those. Do you think there's any reason to go that route at this point?
I have been resistant in the past, but I've been open-minded. Special counsel is only appropriate if there's an allegation of a crime. And there are several crimes potentially at play here. The hacking of the DNC is a crime. I don't hear people talking about that much. The dissemination of classified information is a crime. General Flynn's comments to the FBI may or may not constitute a false statement to a law enforcement official. And I've heard allegations that this rises to the level of obstruction of justice. So you do have a sufficient evidentiary basis for a crime. But the other half of the equation is whether or not the Department of Justice or any of the 94 U.S. attorneys can do the job themselves. And I have not been persuaded that all 94 U.S. attorneys in our country, many of whom are women and men who have nothing to do with politics, are incapable of fairly adjudicating this fact pattern.
All right, one last question on this, then I want to get to the next subject with you. If James Comey believed that what the president said to him was an effort to obstruct justice, to get him to table this investigation of Mike Flynn, would he be obligated to let the Department of Justice know right away?
I don't think so. I'm probably in a minority here. I don't think Director Comey reported President Obama the 4 different times he prejudged the outcome of an investigation. And there were 4 different times. Director Comey has not been afraid in the past to say no to presidents and attorney generals. He did it when he was with the Department of Justice. I think if he felt like this was an effort to influence him, he knows exactly what to do. But I won't know that until I have a chance to ask him.
All right. One thing we're left with still in all of this is an empty seat at the head of the FBI. And your name was on that short list. You asked for it to be taken off. Why? Why do you think you're not the right person for that job?
I think the country can do better than me, quite frankly. I did have 20 years in a courtroom, Martha. That's the best job I've ever had. But the reality is, in this current political environment, I am known more for being asked to chair one committee than I am the 20 years I spent in a courtroom. And my first rule of friendship is don't ask friends to do things that are not in their best interest. And the Senate confirmation process would be dreadful and it'd be miserable. And quite frankly, I think the country deserves a woman or a man who is devoid of political taint. And whether I like it or not, whether I wish I could wash it off or not, I have been in politics for 6 years. I think I could be fair, but I don't know that I could get the job, and I don't know that I could convince a sufficient number of my fellow citizens that I would be fair. And quite frankly, they deserve an FBI director that is above reproach.
We're just learning that Jason Chaffetz the congressman is saying that he has a subpoena pen hanging over this memo, and he would like to see it. Any reaction to that?
I don't know that he would have to subpoena it. I thought he was recuperating from surgery. I'm glad he's doing better. And he found a subpoena pen. I don't know that you would need to subpoena this memo. If it was read to the New York Times, I would certainly hope the FBI would read it to members of Congress. So hopefully it doesn't come to that.
I want to go back a little further in the Jim Comey story. You put out a statement when he was fired saying that he had a very tough job and access to the facts that perhaps the rest of us did not, is the way that you put it. You know, a lot of people have said that his performance on July 5th, when he came out and said, you know, we have all this evidence, extreme carelessness on the part of Hillary Clinton, and yet we are not going to prosecute her. Was that news conference enough in and of itself to let him go, do you think?
No, and I think when history knows the full fact pattern that led Director Comey to have that July news conference, I mean, I think what your viewers know is a meeting on the tarmac between the spouse of a suspect, or the target of an investigation, the Attorney General. What your viewers don't know, Martha, and what Jim Comey frankly can't tell them because it's classified, and I can't tell them because it's classified, there were a lot of other reasons that Jim Comey decided to take that decision upon himself. And I think history, and I've had plenty of differences with Jim Comey. I want to be really clear about that, lots of them. But I think history is going to be much kinder to Jim Comey in that July press conference than the Democrats were when he had it. I think he had access to information that, because he is a stand-up guy and he's not going to disseminate classified information, although God knows everybody else is, he's not going to do it, even if it casts him in a negative light. So all your viewers see is this meeting on the tarmac. Jim Comey had access to additional information that I am convinced left him with no other choice than to make the decision he made in July.
So you're saying he had no choice? There was pressure on him to not prosecute Hillary Clinton? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I think he had access to information, and he wanted to safeguard the integrity of the investigation and the integrity of the process. And I probably ought to just leave it right there. But no, I'm not talking about pressure. I don't think the guy feels pressure. I think he wanted the public to have confidence in the investigation and the outcome. Even though I disagreed with the outcome, he wanted you to have confidence in the process. He had access to information that your viewers don't have, and they may not ever have because it is classified. But trust me when I tell you this, Martha, I know what it was. And I have been a critic of Jim Comey in the past. But he made the only decision he could have made with respect to appropriating that decision away from the Department of Justice and making the decision himself. And history will be a hell of a lot kinder to him than the Democrats were at the time.
I only take away from that you're suggesting that there were more entanglements between the Clintons and perhaps the Justice Department than everyone understands.
You're very perceptive.
Okay. Thank you. Trey Gowdy.
Yes, ma'am.
Always good to see you, sir. We'll dig for more on that
you.
later. Good to see you, sir.
Yes, ma'am. That would be my advice.
Okay. She says the more she learns, the more her boss is vindicated. Do you see it that way?
I think that there were reasons to replace James Comey as the FBI director. I think it took this administration a long time to settle on those reasons, and some of the reasons they cited initially weren't all that good. I've had my differences with Jim Comey. He's gone now. We have a new FBI director. President Trump picked the person that he wanted. I'm very interested in talking to Jim Comey, not about how he left the FBI, but about some other decisions he made while he was the FBI director.
Such as?
Well, if there's anything that's axiomatic in investigations, is that you don't make up your mind until you interview the last witness. It is beyond dispute that he made up his mind not to charge Secretary Clinton before he interviewed her. There's no question about that. What my friends in the Senate have uncovered is he may well have made up his mind before he interviewed the last dozen witnesses. So how in the world my fellow citizens can have confidence in an investigation where you reached the conclusion before you even gathered all the facts and all the evidence is stunning.
Just one more thing on that. There's a report that suggests he started writing his report 2 months prior to announcing his decision. So that would not have been July of 2016, but rather May of 2016. Does that square with the information you have?
The Senate has information I don't have. I want to say that up front. I do have information on the House side.
You just referred to it as to drawing conclusions before you get to the interviewee or the entire investigation itself.
Right. What I'm saying is there's sufficient factual basis to bring him in and ask him, when did you make up your mind that you were not going to charge Secretary Clinton? I can tell you, because I've seen with my own eyes, he made up his mind before he interviewed her. How far back, whether it was 2 weeks or 2 months, quite frankly, Bill, is immaterial to me. He did it before he interviewed the last witness.
Okay. Another story here quickly. Susan Rice, there's a report out there, says that she apparently told House investigators, perhaps herself as well, that the reason she asked for the unmasking of Trump officials is because leaders from the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, were in the U.S. in December, in that period between the election and inauguration period. And she believed that she needed to figure out why, because the White House was not notified. Were you there when she delivered that information? Is that information accurate?
I was there. I was one of the 3 members on our side that was questioning Ambassador Rice. I don't want to get into the details of her testimony because, frankly, it's not fair to highlight one part. She was there for 2.5 hours, so to highlight one point and exclude the rest of them, I will tell you this. Unmaskings are policy-centric. It's not a question of whether or not that's a crime. It is definitely a crime to disseminate classified information. And I was really clear in asking her about that. She stayed longer than she was supposed to stay. And Bill, I mean, I've been really tough on Susan Rice in the past. I think it's important that when a witness does a good job, you tell people she did a good job, and when she doesn't do a good job, you tell them that too.
Maybe I asked the
she
question.
did a good job.
She did a good job. So her answers were satisfactory to you then?
To say that they're satisfactory, I have no reason to impeach them or contradict them. That there's a whole body of documents that I need to know whether or not what she said is corroborated or contradicted. I don't usually just go based on what someone said, particularly if they're documents that either refute it or corroborate it.
Okay. Is this report true or not? Can you answer that?
Which report? The
About
CNN
the
report?
UAE, the leaders in the U.S., and that's the reason why she did what she did. True or not?
I can tell you it's not inconsistent with her testimony. Whether or not that's true or not,
Understood.
I can't tell you, but it's consistent with what she said.
Got it. Trey Gowdy, thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir.
Coming
Thank
back
you.
Here.